Silence is often misunderstood. People think it means weakness. They think it means you have nothing to say. They think it means you gave up. But silence is rarely empty. Sometimes, it is the loudest thing you will ever say. There was a time when you explained everything. You tried to make them understand. You repeated yourself. You gave clarity where there was confusion. You spoke your truth again and again and again, hoping that one day they would finally hear you. But something strange happens when words are overused. They lose weight. They stop carrying impact. They become noise. Because words only matter when someone is willing to listen. And you began to notice something. It wasn't that you couldn't explain yourself clearly. It was that they weren't trying to understand. So you kept talking, but nothing changed. You kept expressing, but nothing shifted. You kept giving explanations, but they kept missing the point. But from not being heard. Because there is a difference, a painful difference, between being silent and being ignored. And at some point, something within you changes. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. You realize, explaining yourself to someone who refuses to understand is a form of self-abandonment. So you stop, not because you have nothing to say, but because you finally understand something powerful. Not every situation deserves your words. Not every person deserves your energy. And that is where silence begins. At first, they don't notice, because they are used to your voice filling the space, used to your explanations, used to your effort. But silence creates space, and space reveals absence. A conversation that once felt constant now feels incomplete. The energy that once surrounded them now feels distant. And slowly, they begin to feel it. Not your words, but your lack of them. Because silence removes distraction. It removes explanation. It removes the comfort of knowing where you stand. And that uncertainty, it unsettles them. They start to wonder, what changed? Why are they so quiet? Why aren't they reacting the way they used to? And for the first time, they begin to think. Because silence forces reflection. When you were explaining everything, they didn't have to think. They didn't have to question themselves. They didn't have to face anything. But now, there is nothing to respond to, nothing to argue with, nothing to dismiss, only silence. And silence is difficult to ignore, because in silence, they are left alone with their own thoughts. And that is where realization begins. They start replaying things, your words, your reactions, your efforts, things they once overlooked, now come back with clarity, not because you repeated them, but because you stopped. This is the power of silence. It shifts responsibility. It moves the focus away from you and places it on them. And most people are not used to that. Nothing to dominate, nothing to win. And without that, ego becomes uncomfortable. They begin to feel something unfamiliar. Not anger, not frustration, something deeper, awareness. Because now, they have to sit with what they avoided. Their actions, their words, their behavior. And that is where the lesson begins. Not through confrontation, not through argument, but through absence. Because when you stop explaining, you stop protecting them from their own reflection. And reflection can be painful. They start to see things differently, things they dismissed, things they minimized, things they took for granted. And suddenly, your silence feels louder than anything you ever said. Because now, it carries meaning. It says, I'm done explaining. I'm done chasing. I'm done trying to be understood by someone who refuses to see. And those words, they don't need to be spoken, because silence communicates them more clearly than language ever could. This is where emotional intensity begins to rise. Because now, they feel the shift. The person who once tried so hard is no longer trying. The person who once cared so openly is now reserved. And that difference, it creates tension. They may reach out, ask questions, test the silence. But your response, or lack of response, feels different. Not cold, not angry, just distant. And distance creates perspective. Because now, they are no longer in control of the dynamic. And when control is lost, clarity begins to form. They begin to understand something they couldn't see before. Your silence is not punishment. It is consequence. A natural response to being unheard, unseen, unvalued. And that realization, it carries weight, because it forces them to confront something uncomfortable. They didn't lose your words. They lost your willingness to speak. And that is far more significant. Because words can return. But willingness, that takes time to rebuild. Or sometimes, it never returns at all. This is why silence creates deeper impact than confrontation. Because confrontation invites defense. It creates resistance. It allows ego to justify itself. But silence leaves no room for defense. It simply exists. Unarguable. Unavoidable. And in that stillness, truth becomes clearer. Not because you forced it, but because they were finally ready to see it. This is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be understood is often the moment they begin to understand. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to feel something. Enough to recognize what changed. Enough to realize what they lost. And that realization, it becomes their lesson. Not because you taught it directly, but because your silence made it impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, something else is happening. You are changing, not just externally, but internally. You are learning self-control. You are learning that power is not always an expression. Sometimes, it is in restraint. You are learning that not every emotion needs to be shared. Not every thought needs to be explained. Not every situation needs your reaction. And that awareness, it strengthens you. Because now, you are no longer driven by the need to be understood. You are grounded in understanding yourself. And that shift, it is powerful. Because when you understand yourself, you don't feel the need to prove it to others. You become calm, centered, unshaken. And that energy, it speaks louder than any words ever could. People feel it, even if they don't fully understand it. They feel the difference between who you were and who you are now. And that difference, it creates respect. Because silence, when used with awareness, is not weakness. It is control. Control over your reactions. Control over your energy. Control over what you choose to give and what you choose to keep. And that control, it is what most people lack, which is why they misunderstand silence. They think it means absence, when in reality, it means presence. Presence within yourself. A refusal to engage in what drains you. A decision to step back from what does not serve you. A quiet strength that does not need validation. And that kind of strength, it cannot be ignored, even by those who once overlooked you. So now, your silence becomes more than just quiet. It becomes a message, a boundary, a lesson, and whether they fully understand it or not, it changes something in them and in you. Because you are no longer the person who explains everything. You are the person who chooses where your energy goes. And that choice, that awareness, that restraint, it is your power. So now I want to ask you something. Have you ever reached a point where you stopped explaining, and your silence said everything? And when you did they finally start to understand? Comment below. I want to hear your experience. And if this spoke to you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.